Apple chips in America sounds like a win for workers. First, follow the dollar. Because when this headline hit, Intel shares surged 11%. That was the first visible paycheck. Not a worker paycheck. Not a new hire walking through a plant gate. A stock chart. And that doesn't mean the headline is fake. It means the headline is incomplete. The story people heard was simple. Apple chips, designed and made in the United States. The story people felt was even simpler. Maybe factory jobs are finally coming back. But the story the money tells is more complicated. It moves through taxpayers, Intel, suppliers, construction crews, specialized technicians, Apple, and shareholders before it ever reaches the ordinary worker who heard the word factory and pictured a broad middle-class comeback. So this video is not asking whether domestic chip manufacturing matters. It does. It matters for supply chains, national security, local economies, and some very real jobs. The question is narrower and more useful. When a reshoring headline says "Made in America," who actually gets paid? That question matters because a headline can use one patriotic phrase to cover several different money stories. There's the national security story, there's the company story, there's the shareholder story, there's the supplier story, and then there's the worker story, which is the one most people hear first. To see it, picture Mike. Mike is 52. He worked around manufacturing most of his adult life. When he hears Apple chips may be made in America, he doesn't picture a grant application, a supplier contract, or a semiconductor workforce report. He pictures a plant with a parking lot full of regular workers. That picture isn't foolish, it's history. Manufacturing used to be one of the main ways a worker without a fancy degree could get steady pay, benefits, overtime, and pride. So when someone says Apple, Intel, chips, America, and factory in the same sentence, the emotional math happens fast. And there's a real reason the comeback story hits so hard. According to the Semiconductor Industry Association, the US share of global chip manufacturing capacity fell from 37% in 1990 to 10% in 2022. That's the wound under the headline. The country used to make a much larger share of the world's chips. Now, every domestic chip story feels like a reversal. But the first reveal is this. A comeback in capacity is not automatically a comeback in broad access factory jobs. Modern chip plants are not old assembly lines with a different product. They're extremely expensive machines that need clean rooms, precision tools, engineers, technicians, supply contracts, construction timelines, and public incentives. That's where the money map starts. The CHIPS program administered by Commerce includes about $50 billion. Roughly $39 billion is for incentives, and about $11 billion is for research and development. So before Mike ever asks, "Can I get hired?" the first big question is, who gets the public support? Put that in plain money terms. In a rough $100 version of this public program, about $78 would sit in the incentives bucket, and about $22 would sit in research and development. That's not a household budget. It's just a simple way to see the priority. Most of the visible public money is aimed at making projects happen first. That doesn't make the support bad, it makes the order important. In this kind of project, the public dollar often arrives before the worker paycheck. It helps make the factory possible, but it doesn't tell you who the final paycheck reaches. Intel is the cleanest example in this story because the public money is already visible. NIST's CHIPS Awards list about $7.8 billion in Intel funding across 4 states, about $3.94 billion for Arizona, $1.86 billion for Oregon, $1.5 billion for Ohio, and $500 million for New Mexico. That's not one giant paycheck to workers, it's a funding map. It supports fabs, upgrades, tools, facilities, and the broader manufacturing base. Some of that can become jobs, some becomes equipment, some becomes supplier revenue. Some supports projects that may matter nationally, even if they don't show up as a direct raise in Mike's household. This is the first callback to the money map. The headline says "Made in America." The map asks which state, which project, which company, which cost, and which worker. And then the chip itself complicates the story. A modern chip is not just one thing happening on one factory floor. The value chain runs through research and development, design, front-end fabrication, and back-end assembly, testing, and packaging. So when a headline says a chip is made in America, you have to ask which step it means. That matters because Apple is already tied to a broader US chip supply chain. NIST lists a $6.6 billion award for TSMC's Arizona project, tied to a planned $65 billion investment. It also lists a $407 million award for Amcor's advanced packaging facility in Peoria. Fabricating a wafer is not the same as packaging a chip. Designing a chip is not the same as building it, and a component made in America is not the same as the entire device being made here. These distinctions sound technical, but they decide who gets the money. This is why the audit has to be boring on purpose. If a headline says Made in America, the audit asks which step. If a politician says jobs, the audit asks which jobs. If a stock jumps, the audit asks whose upside. It slows the story down just enough to keep the worker from disappearing inside the slogan. Now go back to Mike. He hears factory and thinks payroll. The project hears factory and thinks capital spending first. Look at the Intel Ohio example. The reported project was $20 billion. It was tied to 7,000 construction jobs and 3,000 permanent positions. Construction jobs are real jobs. They can be good jobs, but they're not the same as permanent fab jobs, and they don't answer the long-term paycheck question in the same way. This is where a reshoring headline starts to split into phases. Phase 1 is announce, Phase 2 is build, Phase 3 is operate. A worker may benefit in one phase and never enter another. That doesn't mean the jobs are imaginary. It means the old mental model is too simple. The image in Mike's head is one plant and one hiring line. The real map has construction unions, equipment installers, cleanroom specialists, engineers, technicians, suppliers, and then the permanent fab workforce. This is where the story can be both good and frustrating at the same time. If Mike's neighbor is an electrician working on the build-out, that neighbor may see the comeback clearly. If Mike's nephew is studying electrical engineering, the headline may point toward a serious career. But if Mike is waiting for the old factory ladder to reopen exactly as he remembers it, the same headline may feel like a door with a much smaller handle. And then comes the midpoint turn. The useful question is not just are the jobs coming back, the useful question is what kind of jobs are coming back and who can actually get them. The Semiconductor Industry Association projects 115,000 new semiconductor jobs by 2030. That sounds like a straight jobs comeback. But the same workforce analysis says 67,000 of those jobs, about 58%, risk going unfilled. That 58% is the anchor number for the rest of the story. If you imagine 100 new jobs, the industry is warning that 58 of them could be at risk of sitting empty without enough qualified workers. The bottleneck is not only demand, it's the worker pipeline. Another rough translation. If the workforce pipeline were a $100 problem, the 58% at-risk share would be the $58 portion still not solved. The factory can be announced, the subsidy can be approved, the equipment can be ordered, but that $58 worker pipeline problem still has to be paid down with training, recruitment, relocation, and time. For Mike, that changes the meaning of the headline. A job can exist in his town and still be out of reach if the training, certification, experience, commute, age, or hiring screen doesn't match his life. A country can reshore production and still leave many workers asking why the comeback missed them. And the unfilled job mix shows why. The SIA breakdown says 39% of the unfilled jobs are technicians, another 35% are engineers or computer scientists, the remaining 26% are master's or PhD level engineers. That's not a sign that ordinary workers are worthless, it's a sign that the door is narrower than the slogan. Some technician roles may be reachable through certificates, community colleges, apprenticeships, or two-year paths, but reachable is not the same as automatic. This is the second callback to the money map. The dollar is still moving. Public support has moved, company investment has moved, construction money has moved, supplier money has moved, but the broad worker paycheck is now behind a skill filter. And to be clear, the jobs that make it through that filter can pay well. BLS data puts the median pay for electrical and electronic engineering technologists and technicians at $77,180. In semiconductor and related component manufacturing, that occupation's median is listed at $65,720. Computer hardware engineers are much higher, $155,020 overall, and $162,460 in the semiconductor and related industry. So the point is not that chip jobs are bad, many are good. The point is that the benefit is concentrated through specific roles. If Mike can reach the technician lane, the headline may become real for him. If he can't, the money may pass through his region without becoming his paycheck. That's why the conversation should not flatten workers into one group. Some workers need a job opening, some need a credential, some need a training slot that doesn't require quitting work first, some need the plant close enough to drive to, some need a hiring system willing to look at experience that didn't come from a semiconductor fab. The headline says jobs, the audit asks whether the bridge to those jobs actually exists. This is why the stock chart in the opening matters. A shareholder can react in seconds, a public award can be announced in a press release, a supplier contract can move through a corporate pipeline, but a worker has to cross time, training, location, hiring, and project delays. The speed is different. The risk is different. The person waiting for a job is not standing at the same place in the line as the person holding the stock. There's also a second reason to be careful with the Apple part of the headline. Some coverage reported that Apple expected more than 19 billion US-made chips in 2025, including tens of millions from TSMC Arizona. That sounds enormous. But chips can mean many kinds of components, not just the flagship processor people imagine when they hear Apple Silicon. This is another place where the phrase "made in America" can do too much work. It can mean a component, it can mean fabrication, it can mean packaging, it can mean design, it can mean a supply chain milestone. The phrase may be true and still not mean what the listener pictures. That's not just a language issue, it's a paycheck issue. If the work is packaging, the worker mix is different. If the work is fabrication, the capital need is different. If the work is design, the hiring lane is different. If the work is mostly a component inside a larger device, the local job story is different again. Now, none of this means reshoring is pointless. That would be the lazy conclusion. A domestic chip supply chain can reduce risk. It can support regional economies. It can create high-wage jobs. It can build technical capacity that matters if global supply chains break. It can also make sense even when every taxpayer doesn't see a direct paycheck. The fair version is this. The country may need the capacity even if the payoff is uneven. A local economy may benefit even if every resident doesn't get hired. A worker may find a path in, but the path may run through training instead of a simple application. That's not a scandal by itself. The problem starts when the public hears one thing and the money map quietly shows another. But if the public sells the story as a broad factory comeback, then the public deserves to see the money map. Because otherwise the emotional promise is bigger than the proof. So here's the reshoring paycheck test. First, ask what exactly is being made. Is it designed here, fabricated here, packaged here, assembled here, or only partly sourced here? Second, ask whose money starts the project. Is public support part of the deal? Third, ask who gets paid first. Is it the company, equipment suppliers, construction firms, or permanent workers? Fourth, ask what kind of jobs are promised. Construction jobs, permanent fab jobs, technician jobs, engineering jobs, and supplier jobs are not interchangeable. Fifth, ask who can realistically enter those jobs. The 58% worker gap risk matters because a job opening only helps a worker if the path to that job exists. Sixth, ask who owns the upside. In this story, Intel's stock moved fast. Investors saw something right away. Workers may still need years of project execution, training, and hiring before the promise becomes a paycheck. When you run the headline through that test, the story gets less catchy, but more honest. Apple chips made in America may be good news. It may be strategically important. It may create real jobs. But it's not the same as saying broad middle-class factory work has returned for everyone who hears the headline. And that's the useful middle ground. You don't have to mock the headline. You don't have to cheer it blindly. You can put it through the audit. If the answer is clear on the step, the subsidy, the jobs, the training path, and the local wage impact, then the promise is stronger. If the answer is only a stock pop and a patriotic phrase, then the worker story is still unproven. For Mike, the final question is not should I cheer or not cheer, it's where am I on the map? If the project creates a technician lane he can train into, the headline could matter deeply. If the work mostly goes to engineers, equipment vendors, construction firms, or shareholders, then the headline may pass near him without landing in his paycheck. That's the difference between a headline and a household. The headline can say Made in America. The household has to ask paid to whom. Made in America matters, but it doesn't mean paid to everyone until the money path reaches the worker who was promised the comeback. If you want more calm breakdowns of the money behind the headlines, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.